What is up, enthusiasts? Welcome back to another installation of my series Ask the Fans, where I ask fans questions in my community page on YouTube and I wait for replies to come and results to come as well. So this is episode 3. In episode 1 I talked about Falcon's Flight, in episode 2 I talked about Cedar Point, if it's the best park in the world or not, and today I will be talking about the one and the only Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. If you don't know, this is this massive hyper-hybrid coaster coming to the park supposedly in spring 2021. All the way back in March of 2019 they first announced this big old thing, but they of course said it's going to open in 2020. Well, due to the COVID-19 pandemic this did not happen, and we waited a little more, and then the park announced that it would be opening spring of 2021. In the past year and a half with this ride being built, we've seen the layout complete. We've seen even more teasers for this ride. We've seen manned test runs with people on it. We've seen the queue be revealed. We've seen the station revealed. And of course, we have seen manned test runs. That is right, we've seen test runs with people on the train. So obviously this ride is ready to open. But do we know exactly when it's going to open? Of course not. They said that it is opening spring 2021, which technically in a scientific stance, spring is from March to June, but I feel like Busch Gardens and other parks kind of sway that, and I think when it comes to spring, they're talking about a time period from February to May. And the other day, I was sitting around wondering, when will this thing open? This thing is an absolute beast. This thing hauls, even with man test runs that aren't full capacity. There is a pandemic still going on, obviously. All of the other Busch Gardens rides seem to be opening for summer 2021. Well, this one still says spring. It's pretty impressive, but I was sitting around looking at this, and I was like, man, what if I did a poll on this for Ask the Fans? And so, here we are. Let's get into the results right now. So, for a grand total of votes, by the time I took a screenshot of this, we had 383 votes, which for 2.5 days is extremely impressive. Thank you guys so much. So, to get opinions from the fans, I decided to choose from 4 different time slots. One of them being early February, just in time for the Super Bowl in Tampa, Florida, late February, early March, late March, early April, or late April and beyond. These are 4 good time slots around the springtime season, so we could easily see Iron Gwasi opening up around this time. Even if you glance at the poll, it doesn't take a lot to notice that the late March, early April slot is easily the most popular. I mean, it is 58% out of all 4, and that's over half. I mean, looking at that, that's a pretty realistic time slot for the ride. Spring technically begins in mid-March, and this would be a pretty good choice just to open for the beginning of the spring season. And so, it will be open for all of spring, so everyone who booked their trips in spring isn't disappointed. The second most popular result is the last result. It is late April or later. It is 24%, which is about a quarter, which is about the average that it should be. Now looking at this, it should be pretty realistic too that it could open even later. I mean, yes, there are a lot of people that would be disappointed, and this would pass many opportunities like the Super Bowl, WrestleMania, and spring break, but at the same time there is still a pandemic going on, so if they keep that pandemic in mind, we might not see this park open up this ride for a few more months. In fact, if this ends up happening and they take the pandemic route, I don't see this thing opening up until July or June. The late February and early March time slot has 11%. Of course, the first 2 do have the least amount of voters, just because it really is that soon. I mean, late February, early March, we're talking a month from now. We're talking them getting everything together in 30 days. I mean, that is pretty impressive, and if that happens, I wouldn't be surprised, but I feel like parks like to work very slow with their rides, and I feel like they want to be as careful as possible with the opening. The final option when it comes to voting, and the first option when it comes to the time slots, it is early February. Now, there was only one reason why I put this in here realistically. It is that the Super Bowl is happening in Tampa, so even though it will be limited capacity, Tampa's inevitably going to have some more traffic. And in my opinion, I felt like it would have been a really good decision to open it around this time, but oh well. I mean, you still have to have reservations when it comes to that, so if you were in Tampa around Super Bowl Sunday and you wanted to ride it, you would still have to have this season pass. So, looking at it that way, I could definitely see why this got the least amount of votes out of the 4. Now, in this episode, we're not going to focus too much on the replies because obviously the replies just reflect what the results were. There weren't as many explanations in this episode, and when they were pretty generic in my personal opinion. So, in this kind of thing, I wanted to focus more on the poll than the results, but at the same time, I did want to talk about a few of the results right now. And by results, I am talking about the replies from my fans. I absolutely love responding to these replies when it comes to these videos, but unfortunately, like I said, I did get a lot less replies than I usually do. And we did get a lot of polarizing replies. The first one I want to talk about is by Phase Coasters, and he basically says that the ride is already done. There's no reason why it shouldn't be open, which I mean is a pretty good standpoint on paper. Looking at the ride now, it is done. And if they wanted to open it this weekend, they could. And it's really unrealistic that it would, but at the same time, looking at the ride, looking at the queue, looking at all the theming, and looking at the teasers they've come out with, this would be a pretty ideal situation, because all the people coming to this park in March and February would be pretty gypped if they didn't get the chance to ride it. On the other extreme end, I got a reply from 1212 who stated that COVID-19 isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and that's what they're basing the opening of this ride on, so they can't see this ride opening this year at all. I mean, that's a pretty big standpoint here because the latest I have is late April. But then you do have many other replies in that mix. You have Intimate Fanboy that talks about the pass holder preview event that's going on in mid-April, when that could open. So maybe Iron Gwazi could open around that time, or maybe the week before, or maybe around that next week, or maybe something around the time of WrestleMania as well in April. So let's talk about my personal prediction. My personal prediction is that the ride will open in mid-March, because that is when they are resuming week-long operations, and I feel like that is the best bet. That is around the time that schools will start to get into that spring break mood, and in around that April time, the ride will be in full operation. So in my personal opinion, I feel like we could see a good old March opening, and that's that. Now, I know that's a little unrealistic, but that is my personal prediction. Busch Gardens Tampa has been preparing for the opening of this ride, so I don't see this ride opening any later. So I do feel like in March this ride will open. But that is my personal opinion, of course. That is why I, of course, ask all of you guys. So what did you think of this episode? I know this episode wasn't as eventful with the replies, and I promise you all that next episode I will get to more. Well, this is Cedar Flags, and I will see you all later.